Ho ho ho, ladies. Ho ho, gentlemen. Fellas, week 3, NFL is here. It's over. Week 2's over, right? We got the Monday Night Football stream and the Showdown slate all out the way. One of the people of this beautiful community ended up being in first place, so a great way to end the week. Had a good week myself on that Monday Night Football slate, and now we move forward to week 3, where if you're brand new here, about 10,000 plus of you, 5 figures, are seeing this every single week. So if you're brand new, how you doing? My name's Vetri. I cover daily fantasy sports, sports betting, and a variety of different sports, but the head honcho, the heavy hitter, the kingpin of all the major sports, the NFL is here. So we're focusing every single day, maybe 1 to 2 pieces of content going out on the channel every day to help you. My Twitter at DFS will always have a schedule of my content for each and every week pinned up to the profile. If you ever want to know, yo, I kind of like that guy, I like this content, does he got anything else? Bam, there you go. Or you can just roam around this YouTube channel, and while you're there, hit a like on this video and hit the subscribe button on any of the videos. And the bottom right hand corner of this video, it's totally free, it takes 2 seconds of your time. I really do appreciate that. We're going to go position by position. Again, I'm recording this early on a Tuesday morning, but I got up at about 3 a.m. today. I've done about a couple hours of research yesterday for week 3. I've already gotten about 3 hours of research in today. We have a very deep preliminary look so far, and then we'll finish this up obviously later in the week. We'll have the final thoughts on Friday. We'll do the live stream on Sunday, and a bunch of content in between there that you can check out all of that. And this video right here is brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight. And I'm very excited to talk about the offer that Monkey Knife Fight less than a week ago told me about they're changing over to for the NFL season. A 100%, that's right, 100% dollar Ruski match up to $50. So use the promo code Vetri, my last name, very easy, Vetri. If you put that in on Monkey Knife Fight, there's a link down below to get there in this podcast and YouTube episode. All you got to do is you put that promo code in. If you want to put $10 in, they'll give you $10 for free. You want to put $25 in, they'll give you $25 for free. You want to be a heavy hitter and put a $50 bill, a $50 Ruski in there, they'll give you $50 back. You got $100 in your account. It's a more or less, it's an over-under. They have a bunch of different prop games on there. It's a lot of fun. You can try and combine a couple people who's going to have the long touchdowns. There's a lot of different ways that you can play if you don't just like the more or less type of format, over-under type of format. So again, it's promo code Vetri, Vetri. Lets them know that you came from me on Monkey Knife Fight, 100% deposit match for $50 Ruskis, or up to $50 Ruskis. So with all that said, let's get into it. And I'll zoom in a little bit so I can reference the team total and game total and pace and all that stuff on my screen. It might not be on the screen, just so you can see some of the notes that I've taken. And yeah, we're going to start it off with the 2 most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. No, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are playing on Monday night, so you're not going to see them on this slate. But Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott, and deservingly so, these guys are the 2 most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. And you know what? They play each other this week. And you know what? It's a 55.5 point total to open up. And DraftKings has not adjusted yet these salaries on all the pass catchers on both teams. None of the pass catchers are in the 7K range. Most of the pass catchers, I think all of them, are below $6,500 on both of these teams this week. And a lot of the Cowboys pass catchers are in the 5K range. So this is pretty crazy. Obviously, I'll have interest in both of them. If you want to look at Russell Wilson, he's the number 2 graded overall quarterback so far through Pro Football Focus. Dallas ranks 19th in coverage and 23rd in pressure. So another fine matchup for Russell Wilson, who, yes, he cooked in week 1. And yes, technically he cooked in week 2, right? He had 5 passing touchdowns, but he only threw the ball 28 times. So a lot of people in week 1, he was throwing the ball in the first quarter, and he was throwing the ball early and often. And then in week 2, it went back to old efficient Russ, 28 attempts and 5 touchdowns on that. So a lot of people are going to kind of use the narrative this week of probably saying that, oh, Russ is like just throwing the ball everywhere. Okay, yes, he did in week 1. Week 2, he didn't. He just was very efficient like he normally is half the time. If you only see 28 attempts out of Russell Wilson in a game, that's not him cooking. That's just normal Russ. We want to see those 35 to 40 attempts. But in this game, with a 55.5 point total, and you're going to be forced to throw with Dallas on the other side, throwing the ball almost every single play, even to Zeke, running so many routes, a career high in routes through 2 weeks for Ezekiel Elliott so far. And yeah, obviously I have a lot of interest in Russell Wilson, who's been pressured on 40% of his dropbacks, which is actually a pretty high number. Anything above 30% starts to become concerning. We know this offensive line isn't good. That's kind of what he's dealing with his whole career, but it's still going to be the case here. 9.8 yards per attempt is tied with Lamar Jackson for first in the league right now, averaging 304 yards per game. A 30 implied team total is tied for the highest in the slate. Yes, $7,300 Russell Wilson is too cheap this week, especially in the game stack options with Dallas players. And then you go to the other quarterback on the other side, and it's Dak Prescott, who as of right now is averaging 8.3 yards per attempt. That's good. Pressure on 33% of his dropbacks, a little bit higher than you would like to see. Number 7 graded quarterback by Pro Football Focus. You're getting a Seattle team that right now through 2 weeks rates dead last in pressure rate. So even if Dak's getting a little bit more pressure than usual due to some injuries on his offensive line, now he faces a team that's just not bringing any pass rush. That kind of is going to happen when you lose to Davian Clowney, and you already had a bad pass rush last year even with him. They're going to rank 22nd in coverage. So again, both of these teams are in the bottom half of the league right now in coverage and pressure. Seattle Seattle being dead last, it's going to be a game where, just like Vegas is predicting, a lot of points here. Dak, 48 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns so far is also something to point out. 358 yards per game. That's third so far in the league, only behind Josh Allen and Matt Ryan. And so far, he's had 25 play action attempts, which is very good to see from a passing game, because last year when they were 4-0 Dallas, they were using play action left and right, and then they got away from it. So far this year, they're using it. They should be 0-2, technically, the crazy game against Atlanta, but it's good to see that the offense, at least on one side of the ball, is very much clicking in the passing game right now. Yes, Dak at 7,200 is definitely in play for me. Now, these are early weeks, yes, maybes and no's. Obviously, once I do my projections, I will change some things up. My projection you can get linked down below on Patreon. A lot of people over there, over like 50, 60 people signed up last week. Welcome to all the new patrons and any of you potential patrons. A lot of stuff down there. It's too much to really talk about. 20 plus pages of game-by-game notes, so you kind of have that type of analysis. Projections and rankings and data models, so you have that other side of the analysis and a lot of other stuff in between. You can check it all out linked down below on my Patreon. Patreon.com/Sal_Vetri_. So Cam Newton at 6,700, he's even priced up now. Most of these quarterbacks, they did a good job pricing them up. After a couple of them were still in the 5 and 6K range, but Cam Newton up to 6,700. Number 5 graded quarterback right now in Pro Football Focus. He's looking really good. 23 attempts so far, and most of them, like a lot of quarterbacks, are just on scrambles. Most of these are actual like real attempts that they're just calling for him. 23 rushing attempts and only 3 are scrambles so far. So that's pretty crazy. What you're seeing, 122 yards and 4 touchdowns. Probably should have 5 rushing touchdowns if you watch the way that game ended on Sunday night. The offensive line has been very good, but it's also his running ability that's keeping pressure off of him. Only an 18% pressure rate on his dropbacks, seeing a nice 8.8 yards per attempt. Cam's been a beast. Cam's been a monster. This is MVP Cam, and he's playing the exact same way he did during that season in the running game and in the passing game. And right now you're getting a Vegas team that's bottom 3rd in the league in coverage through 2 weeks. Cam has seen 28 play action passing, which is top 5 in the league right now. Again, efficiency. So yes, I like Cam. If you're going to have a quarterback that they're literally designing 10 rushing plays a game for, and all the rushing plays around the goal line right now, how do you not have interest, especially if he's still below $7,000 and in a good matchup? Yes, give me that Cam Newton. So I really wasn't on Josh Allen after he had a career high in passing yards in week 1. I just thought, you know what, they're throwing 40 plus times even in the second half. I think they're just trying to get him as much usage as they can since they didn't really have a preseason. And then the exact same thing happens in last week's game. Now, last week's game was much closer, so they were forced to throw a little bit more, but Josh Allen breaks his own record going for over 400 yards. Right now, he leads the league with 364.5 yards per game, 33 play action passes. So this team's actually using Josh Allen in an efficient way. Now, is he being efficient? Honestly, yeah. Josh Allen is being efficient right now. He's seeing 9 yards per attempt, which is right now top 5 in the league. Those 33 play action passings lead the league. Now, it's obviously easy when you're throwing 40.5 times per game through the first 2 games, but he looks very good. Now he's going to have a test, right? He ended up getting the Jets and the Dolphins. Not the most difficult secondaries, not the most difficult defensive lines. The Jets, we thought would be a decent defensive line. Not looking like that so far. Some injuries already early. But now you get the Rams, who we know how good their defensive line is. And right now we know how good their secondary has been, and it's been really good, outperforming expectations through 2 weeks. Pro Football Focus has it as the number 2 secondary. So if you're looking in this range, I'd rather pay up for Russell Wilson and Dak. I'd rather pay down for Cam Newton. So I don't think I'm still going to get a lot of Josh Allen, but I assume a lot of people don't go there. And I do think that it's going to be the right choice, but something to point out is that he does have a 25 implied team total. They are going to be 2.5 point favorites in this one, so it is a nice spot for him, but all these other guys around him have higher team totals, with Cam Newton 26.5, Russell Wilson 30, Dak Prescott in that crazy environment game in a good matchup 25.5. And this next player, who's still cheaper than him, Kyler Murray, $6,800, I have more interest in. Now, Murray has not been efficient in the passing game, but they're just getting victories here, and he's really just eyeing down DeAndre Hopkins, who leads the league with 25 targets so far. 6.6 yards per attempt is below league average, but he's seeing 39 attempts per game. He's only being pressured on 30% of his dropbacks, and the big one right now is his rushing ability. 11 carries, most of them scrambles. 10 of those 11 are scrambles right now, so not design runs. 158 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it's good to see that he's just taking off and running, which helps us fantasy players. Right now, Detroit ranks pretty much average in pressure, but they're 31st, so second worst team in the league right now in coverage after they just got beaten up again by the Packers and really Aaron Jones in all parts of the game. Murray has 18 play action attempts so far, so this is another great spot. This is another reason why I probably don't find myself on Josh Allen. Yes, he's been insane through the first 2 weeks against bad defenses, and I think he has looked good. I think Stephon Diggs was a weapon that they needed and is changing all different levels of the field for what Josh Allen can do instead of just going deep and then being inaccurate in the short to intermediate range. But yeah, I think that all these guys around him, it's just really tough to want to go there. Other guys to talk about, we won't go too much into detail on every single one of these on the early week show, but Matt Ryan I have interest in. Top 10 in a lot of categories right now, 8 yards per attempt, second in pass attempts so far with 45 per game. You're getting a Chicago team that ranks top 10 in coverage and pressure so far early on. This is what we expect out of the Chicago team, to be a borderline top 5 defense. So that's the one concern here, but you know your stacking options. The problem is that Julio is still expensive. Calvin Ridley continues continues to get even more expensive as he continues to see 100+ yards and 2 touchdown games, like an X amount of percentage of his games as an NFL player, both of them so far this year, which is just absolutely nuts. Hayden Hurst is fairly priced. Russell Gage is somewhat fairly priced at $5K, seeing 20 targets so far this year. So you have stacking options there. You can bring it back with Allen Robinson on the opposite side, or maybe the rookie, Darnell Mooney, who got a lot of usage. Probably not going to do that from the Bears last week, but mainly Allen Robinson. It is an okay spot if you want to find some game stacks, but there's just better places, especially when these guys are only a couple $100s more in Kyler Murray, in Cam Newton, and not that much more expensive to get up to that game with Dak and Russell Wilson. Big Ben has seen just 8 play action passes so far. He's averaging almost 37 attempts per game, 270 yards per game. He's above average 7.4 yards per attempt is a nice efficiency number. Has all the time in the world and now faces Houston's 30th ranked pass rush and 23rd ranked coverage unit. So Big Ben, if you're looking for a spot to get some, I would say, stacks going here, it's going to be tough to want to run it back on the opposite side. Brutal spot for David Johnson. I think it's a decent spot for Brandon Cooks. We'll see what happens with Will Fuller, but you know Deontay Johnson, you know Juju, James Conner to an extent. There's options here. And then there's some other guys we can just touch on quickly. Carson Wentz, it's a get-right spot. Cincinnati 31st in pressure, 14th in coverage. He's averaging just 6 yards per attempt, which is 34th, and 58.8 completion percentage, which is 32nd. And he's not being pressured all that much, just 18th most out of all the quarterbacks so far per dropback. So yeah, Carson Wentz has been absolutely abysmal. This would be the get-right spot if you did want to play him with some of his pass catchers. Deshaun Jackson got going a little bit last week. Zach Ertz has not been paying off his price tag, but the price tag keeps dropping, and he at least saw some more usage and volume with 7 more targets last week. So Wentz is not going to be the sexy option, and this is what happens. You buy low on these players in the best possible spot. I'm not saying right now I'm going to have an overwhelming amount. He's not a yes for me right now, but he's somebody that's at least interesting coming into this week, as all the sentiment is negative on him, and now he's probably going to have definitely the best matchup of the season for him so far, but maybe of his season by the end of the year as well. Other names, if you're watching on the podcast, that I currently have in my maybes list: Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, and even Jeff Driscoll and Teddy Bridgewater. But those are just to kind of point out some guys in the cheap range. I'd rather go to Jared Goff in that 5K range over them, but those are some of the really cheapies. Let's go into running backs now. If you're still watching and if you've liked anything you've seen so far, please do take a second of your time, hit the like button, hit that big old subscribe button for me one time. I'm going to lower this and I'm going to make this so you can see some more things on the screen. But I appreciate all you guys' support so much. We crushed through 28,000 subscribers. By the time I'm doing this video next week, it would be awesome to hit 30,000 subscribers. We need a big push from everybody out there. But hopefully, if you're enjoying this, you can take 2 seconds of your time. Even if you're on the podcast, $50 giveaway to somebody who subscribes in the podcast and leaves a rating and review. It takes literally 30 seconds. The Sal Vetri Show, we're almost approaching 500 rates and reviews, so I do appreciate that. 1 giveaway per week is announced on Sundays, so be sure to get into that raffle if you will. So a lot of carnage at the running back position. No Saquon, no Christian McCaffrey, no San Francisco running backs. It seems like Raheem Mostert's going to miss at least a week. Tevin Coleman's going to be out. There's a bunch of guys, I'm probably missing some of them, that are just not going to be playing this week because of just crazy injuries at this point. So we're going to start this off with some of my guesses. Ezekiel Elliott, price tag only goes up $100. Look, this is going to be his toughest matchup yet. Through 2 weeks, Seattle's defense has been fantastic in the run game. #1 overall so far. But Zeke is playing an elite role, more elite than he's ever seen so far through 2 weeks of his season, and this is because this is the best offense he's ever been in. He has 64 routes run, which is second in the league behind only David Johnson. 9 catches for 64 yards, also has the receiving touchdown on 11 targets. Those 11 targets are second in the league. He has 185 yards on the ground. That's the third most. 44 attempts so far through 2 weeks. That's the second most. He's getting all the red zone carries as well on this team, where they're often in the red zone a lot and running a lot of offensive plays, and second most yards after contact with 143. So he's getting all the money usage, right? He's getting all the usage in the passing game, all the usage in the red zone. He's breaking tackles, so he's getting that elite usage on his own, making way for his own usage in the passing and rushing game, and creating even more points and yards after that. So even though his price tag goes up $100, I think it's still too cheap. Even though the matchup looks a little bit tough and he's a 4.5 point underdog, he's shown that he's now game flow independent. I mean, if you're going to average 5.5 targets per game and so far 4.5 receptions per game, right now in the receiving game, he's averaging like 10 fantasy points alone, right? So obviously we know he's going to get those rushing attempts, even if they're down by 4 or a touchdown, he's still going to see 15 plus attempts. So now you're telling me that I can bake in 20 plus attempts and high upside attempts and touches from Zeke? Yes, I like that a lot. Last week I said at $5,700, you're going to be upset you didn't play Jonathan Taylor if you didn't play him, and then you're going to just go ahead and play him in a couple weeks when he's $8,000. Well, he's already $7,000, and yes, I'm going to be playing him. He's a 10.5 point favorite. Look, all they did last week was run the ball. He had 12 first quarter touches. He had 20 first half touches. 20. You're very happy if a guy has 20 touches in 4 quarters. He had that in 2 quarters. He faces a middle of the road Jets run defense through 2 weeks right now. 17 routes run. He saw 2 targets. So far in the season, he has 8 receptions, which is good to see. Had 2 catches last week. 26 attempts led all running backs on Sunday in week 2. He had 101 yards, 68 yards after contact. He has a top 5 offensive line. And again, he's a 10.5 point favorite. So yeah, he's $7,000 now, but that's fine. He's shown that he's going to be using the passing game. And like last week when they were ahead, all they did was run the ball. And that's a week where all they were doing was also kicking field goals. He got in on the ground for a rushing touchdown, but he should have had even more because all they were doing was kicking field goals, and Phillip Rivers was stalling drives in the red zone. So yes, give me Jonathan Taylor, what looks like 20 plus touches again. Probably going to see himself another 2 to 3 targets. I like this a lot. Again, against the Jets team that seems like they're only going to be implied for like 18 points, 17 points this week. Next up is going to be maybe a little bit of a controversial one that I have him as a yes so far. We'll see what happens if they're going to be keeping the rookie out there, if they're going to be putting Tyrod Taylor back in. Herbert looked fantastic, like very, very good in his first appearance, took the Chiefs to overtime, probably should have won that game. And Austin Eckler comes in. He's ran 41 routes through 2 weeks, only seen 5 targets, but he ends up seeing 4 targets last week and has a nice game in the receiving game from a man in Justin Herbert. He faces a Carolina run defense where he got the second worst run defense last week in Kansas City, and he did pretty good there. Now he gets the worst run defense through 2 weeks in the Carolina Panthers, who were very bad last year as well. He has 35 attempts on the ground for 177 yards. The issue, Joshua Kelly, the rookie out of UCLA, also has 35 attempts. They're 7-point favorites. I think that either way here, Austin Eckler is going to have 20 touch upside. I believe that you're hoping that it's going to be Justin Herbert so that you could probably see 3 to 5 targets in the passing game, and then he gets his 15 carries on the ground. I mean, what you're seeing right now out of Austin Eckler is that he had 19 carries in week 1, a career high, and then he had 16 carries last week, and then you add in a couple of his receptions. So you're probably going to see more times than not 16 to 18 touches with the upside of 20 plus. The issue is that the rookie in his backfield seems to be getting a lot of those money touches, $6,800. If he's going to be low owned again, I'll go there. This one makes no sense to me. Like if you're playing cash games, it looks pretty clear that you're just going to be putting Miles Sanders in there. Like $6,400 Miles Sanders was the workhorse in week 2 in a major way. 20 carries on the ground in a game where they're losing most of the game, mind you. 20 carries on the ground against a good defensive line in the Rams, 95 yards and a touchdown. That alone, 15.5 points would be good usage, right? But then no, he says, you know what? I'm going to outdo that. 31 routes run, 7 targets, 3 catches for 36 yards. So this man comes out here and he just goes off for 130 plus yards. He said it was his MVP season, 130 plus yards. Overall, he ends up seeing 27 opportunities and 23 touches. It's very good to see this. And now he's a 7-point favorite versus a bottom 10 defense in Cincinnati. So in a game where they're trailing, you get this elite usage of 27 opportunities in a huge game. His price tag only goes up $400 as a favorite in a good matchup. Makes no sense. It looks like he's just a lock for a lot of cash games early in the week. On the opposite side of this game, this one would be more of a GPP play. But look, everybody's down on Joe Mixon after 2 weeks. I'm getting so many people telling me, should I trade him for X, Y, and Z? You should probably trade him for Jonathan Taylor if people are offering you that. Yes, you should. But people are telling me just wild trade offers right now. Look, it's through 2 weeks. Philly's run defense right now is about middle of the pack. Cincinnati's run blocking, yeah, it's bad. It's bottom 3rd in the league right now. It's bad in all assets, the pass protection, the run blocking, everything. But he's being involved. 44 routes run is top 5 in the league. Only 5 targets is the issue. We need to see more targets with Giovanni Bernard getting some usage right now, which is weird. I don't expect that to continue after Joe Mixon got this big extension. 35 attempts so far. That's going to be top 6 in the league. I think it's top 5, but that's before Josh Jacobs' stats go in from Monday Night Football, so it'll be top 6. It's only 115 yards, though, is the issue, 3.3 yards per carry. So now he's going to be coming in against the Philadelphia team that we know for a couple of years now has a very good defensive line. They have not been good for the first 2 weeks. We'll see if they can right that ship. Joe Mixon, I'm going to put him as a yes for now. He's in the 5K range. He's only going to be a GPP play for me. He might move to a maybe because I don't really know where I'll be. I'm not going to be including him in any groups or anything like that. He'll kind of just get into my lineup as a lower owned play. I think there's upside there, though. He's still getting a lot of touches. He's still getting a lot of usage. He overall has 20 opportunities per week through the first 2 weeks. That's a lot of usage. So we'll see where that goes. The next one also might become a maybe by the end of the week, but you have right now, it seems like no Raheem Mostert. We'll have to track that. Definitely no Tevin Coleman. Looks like the Jerick McKinnon show. Some Jeff Wilson Jr. will probably get activated at this point. But Jerick McKinnon, right now on Pro Football Focus, it's a limited sample, but the #1 rusher on Pro Football Focus. 6 carries for over 100 yards and a touchdown. 19 routes run, 6 targets. He ended up catching 3 for 20 yards and a touchdown there. The Giants have a good run defense. Top 5 in the league through 2 weeks. Jerick McKinnon is in the best run offense, arguably in the league right now, and he's a 5-point favorite. So at below $5,000, your best option this week below $5,000, to my opinion, there's only like 2 or 3 guys who look viable. Jerick McKinnon looks like the one who's going to come into maybe the most workload. It's going to be right there with Antonio Gibson for guys who probably see somewhere between 15 and 20 touch-ins. That's what Gibson saw last week. I imagine that Jerick McKinnon is going to move into some sort of role along those lines. I don't think it's a lock by any means, so I might move that yes to a maybe because it's not like he's 4K flat. He's $4,900 in a backfield that likes to use multiple backs. I'll point this one out that Josh Jacobs is still a beast. He's going to average, and he has been right now, like 30 opportunities per game. Matchup against New England will be fine. They're 22nd against the run through 2 weeks. So yeah, $7,300 Josh Jacobs is also in play. He can very much be a yes by the next time that you watch this video. David Montgomery has looked good. Atlanta's top 6 against the run right now, but he has looked good. 29 attempts on the ground. He's seen 4 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown. He had to come out of last week's game. He has 5 targets on the year, but then he came right back in with a neck injury. He's had the groin injury. He's all banged up, but he's playing very well right now. Price tag is rising though, but you're at least nice to see some of that pass game involvement. And then some of the other things to talk about from an injury standpoint. Christian McCaffrey is out, so we get Mike Davis in here. CMC's done for like 4 to 6 weeks. Mike Davis was pretty nuts last week in just one dimension, right? He had only 1 carry. Obviously, CMC gets hurt late, but Mike Davis had 16 routes run, targeted on 50% of his routes. Like, that efficiency is not going to keep up, but he might get up to like 28 routes run this week if he is indeed going to be the starter. We'll see if they end up adding anybody out there. Mike Davis had 8 receptions on 8 targets for 74 yards. So 100% catch rate. That's kind of common for running backs. You'll see them catch most of their passes, but that's crazy that he saw that much usage in the passing game. This could just be a blimp on the radar. He is not the cheapest. $5,100 is at least something you have to consider, and it is a tough matchup on the ground against the Chargers, but Mike Davis is definitely in play. Joshua Kelly, who we talked about earlier, definitely in play. 35 attempts on the ground, getting a lot of red zone and goal line work. He's facing the 32nd ranked Carolina run defense, and he's getting a spot where he does have 14 routes run and 2 receptions in the passing game. And then lastly, the second 4K running back that I'm interested in early on, not named Jerick McKinnon, is Antonio Gibson. He has 28 routes run so far this year. He's seen 4 targets. He has 3 receptions. But last week alone, he was the lead back, playing over 60% of the snaps, ahead of McKissick, ahead of Barber, who only played like 1 snap after getting all the snaps in week 1. Maybe this backfield just kind of go all up and down and all over the place for Washington. But Gibson's tape through the first 2 weeks looks absolutely nuts. Like, he looks like the best athlete on the field whenever he's touching the ball, which is pretty crazy that they have some of these athletes like McLaurin and Gibson on their team. They just have to hope that Dwayne Haskins can sustain them and make them look half decent. 13 attempts, 55 yards and a touchdown in week 2, but now he gets a tough matchup against the Cleveland front line, which is kind of sneakily at this point a very strong defensive line. I think some people forget that because of all the hype that Washington gets in the Rams front line, but this is like a top 5 line in the league. So it's a tough matchup for Gibson, but he's a versatile back, so I think he'll be able to overcome it. The issue is that he's a 7-point underdog and his team's only implied for 18.5 points. So you get the cheap price point. That kind of factors all that in. Let us now move over to the wide receiver position. Once again, I'll say that I do have right now on Patreon, I have a bunch of projections. I'm going to be having up, well, the projections will come out later in the week with the rankings. I'll have 20 plus pages of game by game notes for every single viable play in every single game. We'll have showdown stuff information, right? We'll have all the showdown information, golf and NBA projections going up. There's a lot of stuff on there. You can check out the package, targets and touches recaps from the week before. So you're kind of right in line with everything to know and expectations or baseline moving forward. A closing thoughts podcast that comes out over the weekend, especially if you're a GPP player, guaranteed prize pool. If you're cash, all the stuff's going to help you. But GPPs, I talked last week for about 55 minutes about my GPP strategy, my 150 max strategy, my single entry, 3 max, all that type of stuff on the Closing Thoughts podcast. Talked about my exposures, talked about how to use the optimizer and all that type of stuff. So be sure to check that out. Patreon linked down below. Next up, wide receivers. A lot of these are going to be coming from just my interest for stacking, but also just straight up cheap price points, right? So all the guys from Dallas and Seattle, yes, I'm saying all of them. The 2 main guys from the Seattle, DK Metcalf and Lockett. The 3 main guys from Dallas right now, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb, the rookie CeeDee, who looks absolutely amazing, went over 100 yards already in his NFL career, just took 2 games. I like all of them. They're just all so cheap. I mean, Amari's $6,500. How is he the most expensive guy in this game when there's a 55.5 point team total? And Seattle and Dallas have both been pretty shaky in the secondary so far. I mean, Seattle should be good overall, but they've been in situations where they don't have to defend that much like Atlanta, and then they're playing soft defenses. But Amari, so far in the year, very quietly, has 16 receptions for 181 yards on 22 targets. Very quietly is top 3 in the league when it comes to receptions and targets, and even yardage, he's up there as well. So a high total here. He projects for around 8 to 10 targets, 47 yards after the catch so far, and 90 routes run for Amari. He's having a fantastic year, and nobody's talking about it at all right now. And then I like both Seattle guys, $6,500 Metcalf, $6,400 Lockett. These guys are just so cheap. It's so easy to game stack them. 8 receptions for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns for Metcalf. He has 49 yards after the catch. He has seen an elite 2.56 yards per route run, and he's just winning in tough spots like Stephon Gilmore in a Patriots secondary last week. Didn't matter. I mean, part of that's Russ just playing absolutely out of his mind. Part of that's Metcalf, 7 targets per game so far. Then you get Lockett, who has 8 targets per game so far. Jordan Lewis, the Cowboys slot cornerback, who is pretty solid out of Michigan now, a couple years in the league as a veteran, missed last week. Keep an eye on that because Lockett played 61% of his snaps through the first 2 games out of the slot. He's been very efficient. And then we go down to some other guys. I like Odell at 6,300. You saw him kind of break out on Thursday night. I think that he's fine. I think that you just have Baker playing really bad in week 1. Then Baker was sort of a game manager in week 2, looked decent. Odell so far, 7 receptions, 96 yards and a touchdown through 2 games. 8 targets per game is good. 3 deep targets is good. Not really being used in the slot, which you would like to see, but it makes sense. They run a lot of 2 wide receiver sets with Stefanski now in Cleveland, only 9% slot usage. The Allen Robinson eruption game, we thought it was going to be coming last week. I liked a lot of the over props on him. I played a lot of Allen Robinson, like 20-25%, but I think it's coming this week. 6 deep targets, second in the league. It's at least coming soon. Like when a guy's seeing targets deep and the elite slot usage, 41% of his snaps out of the slot, like this is the one thing that the Bears have gotten right, even though how bad they've been with Mitch Trubisky and all this stuff. Like they're putting Allen Robinson in winnable spots down the field, in the red zone, and in the slot as well is when you start to really see a wide receiver become elite. And that's what Allen Robinson is. He's a sleeping giant, especially this year so far. His 17 targets are top 10 in the league right now. He only has 8 receptions for 107 yards, but the production is definitely coming. DJ Moore, After week 1, I was a little bit concerned, like Robbie Anderson's getting a lot of targets. That's still the case, but it's clearly DJ Moore as the number 1 wide receiver. 13 targets in week 2. He now has 22 targets on the season. 24% slot usage is very good to see. DJ Moore is completely fine. He's going to draw a tough matchup versus the Chargers. It's going to be Casey Hayward, Desmond King, all these guys. If he moves into the slot, maybe he'll see as well some Chris Harris Jr., the former Denver Bronco. The price point is just nice enough. Keenan Allen, both quarterbacks have looked his way. I do prefer what we saw last week in actually completions, right, from Justin Herbert and not Tyrod Taylor not playing as accurate or as well. $6,100, and it's just a fantastic matchup against Carolina here. These Chargers in general, like if Justin Herbert starts, there's going to be cases to be having some stacks with Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, right, tight end and Hunter Henry. You can put Eckler in there if you really want to. We haven't seen that type of correlation yet, but if you really want to, put him in that type of a group. But Keenan Allen, top 10 in targets with 17. He has 11 receptions, 133 yards so far. Very quietly having a very good year so far, and 4 deep targets on 43% slot usage. Keep an eye on A.J. Brown. They said early on that he might miss a couple of weeks, so it seems kind of doubtful, at least early on, that he'll play this week. Maybe towards questionable. Very good matchup against Minnesota, so just keep an eye on him. They're a bottom 5 secondary through 2 weeks so far. A couple more guys on here. I mean, there's a lot of wide receivers. I can keep scrolling, right? Like, the wide receiver is always going to be the deepest. I currently have marked as interest like 30 guys or 38 guys so far. Terry McLaurin against Cleveland should be a fine spot. 18% slot usage, 8 targets per game, and an elite 2.58 yards per route run. You've been seeing Terry McLaurin have a fine week. Last week he broke out, 12 receptions, 186 yards, and a touchdown so far on the season. We might just be looking at the new number 1 wide receiver in Pittsburgh. This always happens, right? You have the passing of the torch from Mike Wallace to Antonio Brown, from Antonio Brown to Juju for a short period. And now it might be very quickly Juju to Deontay Johnson, because Deontay Johnson has been an absolute monster. Only 11% slot usage, but on 73 routes run, he's over 2 yards per route run, so that's very good. But he has 14 receptions on a team leading 21 targets, which is top 5 in the league, those 21 targets, 149 yards, and a touchdown. He's looked very good. 7 receptions per game so far, 10.5 targets per game so far. This is very good to see. Price point goes from $4,500 to $5,400, but I still have interest in all formats. And then you have CeeDee Lamb. I talked about all the guys from this Dallas game that I like. CeeDee Lamb, obviously another one of those, 91% slot usage so far. That's elite. He's just dominating the slot, and he's going to have an even better matchup this week against Seattle. So I like that. Over 2 yards per attempt. He's top 10 in routes run with 81 so far, because that team is just running so many damn plays. 11 receptions so far, 8 targets per game, and 165 yards. CeeDee Lamb is the real deal, $5,400. A couple other guys to point out here. N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry's target share has been very good for this team. He has not paid off like Julian Edelman went absolutely berserk last week, but N'Keal Harry is coming. He's only $4,200. I don't know if I yet want to play him in cash, but in GPPs, especially in stacks with New England, Cam Newton, Julian Edelman, and N'Keal Harry, you run it back with somebody like Darren Waller or Josh Jacobs on the other side. That's a pretty solid stack in my opinion for a team with a 26.5 team total. But yeah, N'Keal Harry looks good. 17 targets so far. Very sneaky 17 targets and very sneaky 13 receptions. I think that the target share looks very good right now. I think there's an upside week coming from him. And then you get a couple other guys. DeAndre Hopkins, right? He leads the league in targets right now. He looks fantastic. 22 receptions, leads the league, 219 yards and a touchdown, an elite 2.43 yards per route run. He's just beasting right now. He's expensive, $7,900, but he has a fantastic spot. So if you can afford him in cash, if you can get him in your GPPs in some lineups, go for it. Obviously, I'm not prioritizing him in all those lineups. And maybe in cash I will, depending on what the salary looks like left over, because he's basically as safe as they come right now if you're going to tell me that he's going to be getting 10 to 12 targets a game. KJ Hamler, $3,000 flat. Earlier in the week, I thought that this might just be a joke, but Courtland Sutton's now out for the year. All these guys ending up going out for the year. I believe it was a torn ACL now. KJ Hamler didn't really play in week 1. Week 2, he goes out there. He sees 7 targets, right? Jeff Driscoll looks like he's going to be the quarterback. This is really not a spot you want to bet on. But $3,000 for a guy who saw 7 targets, 3 catches, 48 yards, right? Like, he's probably going to make you tilt your face off is what I tweeted out. Like, he'll probably end up getting 5 targets, 2 catches, like 30 yards. And then you're going to be really upset that you played him in cash for $3,000. What he allows you to do, though, is open up a lot more ups on the upside, right? If it allows you to get DeAndre Hopkins into your cash lineup, and Hopkins goes for 120 and a touchdown and 10 receptions, and he has 30 plus fantasy points, well, then the combination of those guys scoring 40 fantasy points was worth it probably in your lineups, at least from a cash game perspective. Probably not playing him much in GPPs, but there is an upside from Hamler, the rookie, the speedster out of Penn State, who's very good in the slot, can also play on the outside. $3,000 is obviously upside at that point, where the worst case scenario, obviously he gets 0, that's not good, but worst case scenario is he gets you 5 or 6 points, has 2 or 3 receptions for you, and there is no Sutton again, so he's going to be on the field a ton, and it looks like he has an early connection with Jeff Driscoll. Then it allows you to open up more in your cash lineup. So yes, he is going to be a cash viable play. Julian Edelman, 81% slot usage last week. I'll have interest there. And then there's a bunch of guys, right? Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones. These guys are priced up. Both of the Tampa Bay receivers. They're all of interest to me. If you're listening on the podcast, I've got a list of about another like 10 guys that I'm not going to get into too much detail. Actually, it's probably closer to 20 guys that I'm not going to get into too much more detail about. I do like Michael Gallup again. He's getting the same exact usage as CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's just actually converting that right now. That doesn't mean Michael Gallup's bad. It just means that he's getting unlucky. I mean, he has 88 routes run. He's seen 8 targets. He has 5 receptions for 108 yards, and he's running the deep routes down the field right now. It's going to click for him. So yes, GPP interest. I do have interest in Michael Gallup, who's only $100 more now than CeeDee Lamb, and everybody's going to be jumping off of Michael Gallup and going to CeeDee Lamb, and appropriately so. But it's not like Michael Gallup is not getting the usage. All of his usage in terms of downfield targets and high upside targets is still the same as it always has been. It's just more so getting funneled to CeeDee Lamb and Amari so far, and even Dalton Schultz last week. Michael Gallup will be fun in the long run, and let's see if he can get there this week. A lot of other interesting guys like Tyler Boyd, Jarvis Landry. Keep an eye on Kenny Galladay's health status, things like that. It was nice to see Chase Claypool, #1 wide receiver in Pro Football Focus so far through 2 weeks, separating like a monster, and the usage is increasing. Maybe not this week as a GPP play, because I don't know if he gets all the way there with the usage and jumps James Washington yet, but it seems like very soon he will be. So in your season-long leagues, keep a close eye on that. And let's finish it up by getting into the tight end position. And if you made it all the way to the tight end position and you're about 30 minutes into this video or podcast, I appreciate you a ton. I do. And if you just want to show any type of appreciation for the content, please do. It's totally free. Like button, one time for me, and hit that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Big one comes up on the screen on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, take 2 seconds of your time. Hit the subscribe button and leave a 30-second. It takes 30 seconds. You hit the 5 stars on Apple. You can only do it on Apple, or if you're on a computer, you can do it on Stitcher if you don't have an iPhone. But you leave a quick review. I really do appreciate that. We'll go quickly through the tight end position. Tight ends were crazy last week. All the cheap ones seem to go really well for the most part, outside of like Chris Herndon, but you had Mo Alley Cox. He plays really well. Jordan Reed, he plays really well. Relatively cheap Hayden Hurst, he plays really well. All these guys play really well. Jonnu Smith was still relatively cheap. He plays really well with 2 touchdowns. Great to see, great to see. So our first interest is going to be Darren Waller, 5,700. We just saw what he did on Monday Night Football, and if he did that on Sunday night and then the pricing came out, he would be like $6,500. 23 targets so far, #1 in the league amongst tight ends. #2 in the entire league, only behind right now DeAndre Hopkins. 19 receptions. Yeah, that's easily first right now for tight ends and like top 3 in the league for any player, including wide receivers and running backs. 147 yards. He's just an absolute monster. He's the clear focal point of this offense, being used in the slot a ton. He's breaking tackles like an absolute beast. He looks like, as of right now, in my opinion, like a top 3 tight end in this league. Next up, Noah Fant is priced up to 5,400 in a good matchup in the middle of the field against Tampa. 9 receptions, 138 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the season. He has 11 targets so far. Look, there's no Sutton, so the hope here is that he'll get even more usage, especially in the red zone where he's been seeing it. 64 routes run so far. That's nice to see, but we're going to need to see more usage. We can't just see 4 or 5 targets out of Noah Fant. We need those 7 target games to really be hitting on this price point. And I could say the exact same thing for Jonnu Smith, who's now priced up to 5,200, and also a fantastic matchup against Minnesota. He sees 30% slot usage. He's only ran 43 routes though, so just 21 per week. He has 8 receptions though for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. This Tennessee offense in general, Jonnu last year, the whole offense last year, extremely efficient. You're seeing that through 2 weeks this year as well. So the volume needs to come up, I think, right? Unless they're just going to continue to be efficient for 2 straight seasons and run this hot. But we're going to need to see a little bit more volume. Now 6 targets per game, that's good, right? 7 and then 5 last week, but I need to see like an average of 6 to 7 per game, not these weeks where you get 4 or 5, which is going to be the issue for Jonnu if he goes there, because then you're getting the duds of 2 receptions for 30 yards at this 5K price tag when there's guys in the 4K range that can have that same exact downside, but also the same exact upside in some cases. Evan Ingram at $5,000 flat. There's a couple of tight ends that are just kind of falling in price. Evan Ingram and Zach Ertz. Evan Ingram has been playing fine. It's just like his offense can't get into the red zone, but he's been playing fine, right? 84 routes run. That's very a good and elite usage for a tight end. 8 receptions for 74 yards is just kind of meh, right? It's like 7.5 fantasy points per game, but he's had 15 targets, which is very good to see. Daniel Jones is looking his way. 51% slot usage. This is not a guy who blocks at all. He's pretty much very similar to Mike Gesicki. He just goes into the slot and he runs. He's just a sleeping giant, no pun intended on the giant reference, at this price tag. Hunter Henry has now had production from both of his quarterbacks so far, very similar to what Keenan Allen was seeing. 37% slot usage. He has 16 targets, so 8 per game, 156 yards. It's nice to see that he was being featured by both of his quarterbacks, so $4,800 is in play. Hayden Hurst price tag barely comes up, and he continues to be targeted downfield. Last week it started to click. He now has 8 receptions, 12 targets, so 6 per game is good to see, and 110 yards. Had an easier matchup last week and really got there. 55% slot usage is pretty dominant. Tougher matchup against the Bears though this week, but the price tag is still fair. And then some other names. George Kittle, track his status. I think that this injury might be worse than they're letting on because we haven't really had any positive updates. TJ Hawkinson is still being limited, but he has 100% catch rate, 42% slot usage. Now he gets Arizona, fine spot, but again, he's being limited. He's not, if you're watching these games, he comes out like he's only playing like 2 snaps per series, so he's only playing like 66% of the snaps because there was that injury that he had all of last year, and he's been rehabbing all of the offseason. Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Look, Ertz has been okay, right? He hasn't been terrible. He's not being targeted as much down the field, just an 8.4 yards per receptions, but he still has 55% slot usage, and the price point's dropping, and it should be because he has not been great for like his past 8 games. He hasn't been elite, but you're getting right now $5,100. You're getting a get right spot. I think this is the week to play Zach Ertz and these Eagles guys if you really want to. If there's any week, it's this week when everybody's sentiment is down on them, probably lower ownership, and it's the best matchup that they might have on the entire season against the Cincinnati team that does have an improved secondary early on, but it's still not great and has no pass rush at all, so there'll be no reason to block for any of these tight ends. Same analysis for Dallas Goedert, pretty much. He has a 44% slot usage. And then keep an eye on some of these other guys who really kind of popped off last week. Like keep an eye on Dalton Schultz. Maybe he'll be this good. Maybe it was just a factor of them throwing so much, but I'll have interest there. And then if you're going to get the George Kittle to miss again, I mean, DraftKings just dropped the ball on this pricing. $4,000 Jordan Reed, who played 75% of his snaps out of the slot. He saw 10 slot targets. 10 slot targets through 2 weeks. 19 routes run. That's all he did. All he did was run 19 routes in week 2, and he saw 8 targets, absolute monster, 7 receptions, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, if there's no George Kittle, you're probably just locking and loading this week. Yet again, Jordan Reed. Unless you want to play one of these guys. guys. Logan Thomas, $3,700. He also saw elite usage yet again last week. So what you're seeing out of Logan Thomas so far, 64% slot usage. He has seen so far on the season 17 targets. So he ended up seeing, 9 targets last week? So it's going to come off for you. It's just bad quarterback play. 8 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. But if you told me that you were going to get 8 to 9 targets out of Logan Thomas last week at the 3K range, and now his price point only comes up $100 as his target share continues to be like 25+%. Yes, I have interest in the cheap tight ends yet again. Keep an eye on Jack Doyle's health. Mo Alley-Cox in his first career start had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 111 yards, 39 yards after contact, looked like an absolute monster. Only ran 16 routes though, so keep an eye on that. The usage was not elite, but he ended up getting targeted downfield, so it paid off a little bit there. And then somebody to keep an eye on maybe for your season-long leagues or as the year goes on, Drew Sample, just 15% slot usage right now, but this is something that's going to be important. CJ Uzomah got hurt. He's done for the year, so now he's the starting tight end for a Cincinnati team that is just chucking the ball right now. He has 41 routes run. He's seen 9 targets so far from Joe Burrow, and again, Uzomah has been healthy for most of that time. 8 receptions for 52 yards. His price tag seems a little bit too close to the Jordan Reeds. You could even throw Dalton Schultz in there, Logan Thomas, Mo Alley-Cox, guys that we have now seen prove it and have been proving it for a while. In Jordan Reed's case, for 2 weeks straight now, very elite usage in Logan Thomas' case, a nice kind of breakout performance from both Dalton Schultz and Mo Alley-Cox. So it's tough to want to go the Drew Sample this week, but it's something to keep an eye on because he has had pretty relatively elite usage for a guy who's been a backup tight end and now is going to get that featured role in an offense that is chucking the ball. The most pass attempts so far this year is in Cincinnati and Joe Burrow. So that's where I'm at right now. That is the position by position breakdown, the early week breakdown. We'll be back later in the week. All my content, you can see the schedule for it up on my Twitter account. It's just pinned up at the top of that, at Vetri DFS. Be sure before you go, hit that like button for me, hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment. Let me know if you watched the entire video, and please go over and support Monkey Knife Fight. They are the sponsors of this show. If you go over there and you do a minimum deposit, whatever you want to do, $10, $20, $50, if you use the promo code Vetri, that is VETRI. Why are you not doing? Go over there, play some player props, play some games. You'll just get free money. Who doesn't like free money to try and put on some free money teasers and free money parlays and even more money from a player prop standpoint on Monkey Knife Fight? So go ahead, put $50 in, you end up with $100 in your account. Bang, bang, bang. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all, and I will see you in the next one.